You were in the broadcast booth when John McSherry on opening day of 1996, 7 pitches into the game, he all of a sudden looks out at the second base umpire, starts to walk towards the Reds dugout, cardiac arrest, and drops dead right on the field. You're one of the few people that has ever been behind the microphone in such a moment. Now, obviously, that's not the case right now with DeMar Hamlin.
Right.
I can't imagine there's anything, I don't even know, Dad, you tell me, any words to describe what it's like to try and have to sit there and talk about something that you know is really, really bad.
Well, the first thing that came to mind when I was watching that tragedy on the field on Monday night was and then the ensuing conversation that went on when everybody realized that it was more than just a quote unquote normal injury. When the EMT started providing CPR and the whole 9 yards and I could tell and I could empathize with Joe Buck. I thought Joe Buck did a wonderful job.
Yep.
Under the circumstances, because I've been there. I know how it is. It's the only time in my career where I've ever had to measure every word that came out of my mouth before I said it. Because I knew, and I don't know how I knew, but I knew when John went down, it was more than just a circumstance that will have a happy ending. I intuitively knew that. So you have to be careful what you say. And all the while you're stunned because you've never been in that position before. You've never seen that type of thing happen before. And so I every time that Joe and they constantly went to breaks, and I understand why they went to breaks.
Yep.
They had nothing to say that was good. And rather than say something that could be misconstrued or something that came out that you'd want to pull back as soon as you said it, they had the safety net of going to a commercial break, and I understood all that. It's just a terrible, terrible situation. And you and I both know this, Tom, and I think this is broadcasting 101. I learned it when I was in Salisbury, North Carolina back in the 60s before I moved on. If there's an injury on the field, you never speculate on what that injury is. Because you may have a mom, a dad, a husband, a wife, children, whatever the case might be, listening to your broadcast. And you don't want to, you may have a feeling, and I did as far as McSherry was concerned, but you don't want to comment about what you think is wrong because you don't know. And in those situations, it just can create terrible heartache and terrible concern that may be baseless, or it may be something that you commented on that you turned out to be correct on. And we all learned that early. But I sat there and I rooted for Joe to get through it because I know he was affected like all of us were. He had to carry the load on that thing. And then later on, they brought Troy Aikman in and he made comments. But it was just something that hopefully, if we live to be 1,000 years old, we never have to be confronted by again.
You know, in this day and age, back in 1996, you didn't have all the social media and all that kind of thing that we have now. You don't have the talking heads constantly. You didn't have them constantly like they are now. I got to tell you, Dad, and I wasn't aware of it until this morning, and sitting here talking to Brandon and Trace and Paul about, I don't know if you saw some of the comments made by Bart Scott, former outstanding player in the National Football League and now is a talking head on ESPN, and made some comment yesterday blaming T. Higgins, saying he lowered his head into the chest of this guy. I mean, I just found out about it.
He ought to be fired.
Well, I mean,
he ought to be fired.
I just can't imagine. I can't imagine how T. Higgins must feel through all of this. His mom has been extremely active on social media and sending out prayers for the Hamlin family and everybody involved. I can't imagine how he feels. And now when you have some guy who played the same game he played, to turn
Right.
around and come out and throw it out there, right? Where it's out there now. I mean, he's already said it. I know about saying something, and it's out there, and it's going to be out there forever. But to put T. Higgins in that kind of situation, to say that, is just unfathomable.
Well, it's completely irresponsible is what it is. And I think it's a prime example of hiring people in the broadcast industry today who are not prepared to be in a position like Mark Scott is in, has no clue about how, what kind of deportment that you need to exhibit in times like everybody is dealing with right now. But to blame T. Higgins for something like that is absolutely ridiculous. And it's amazing because in the moments after we realized this thing was really a tragic thing, his name was one of the first that came to my mind because I just felt that, you know, this kid, right or wrong, and I think it's absolutely wrong for him to even think that he might have had something to do with that, and bear any kind of burden or any kind of guilt. And then to have a guy like Mark Scott kick him while he's down by saying that maybe he had a direct hand in putting Damar Hamlin in the position that he's currently in. It's ridiculous. And again, I blame the networks. I blame a lot of people that are responsible today for hiring guys who have no experience to speak of at all and don't know how the hell to deal with situations like this other than to say stupid shit.
The Reds played the next day after John McSherry died on the field. They resumed
There's a story behind that, too.
Well, go ahead. Please
go ahead.
share it with us. Love to hear it.
Well, you know, and you probably know this, and you may have already discussed it. If you have, stop.
No, we have not.
Okay, well, you know, you said 7 pitches in, and that's correct. I mean, the game began at 1:05, and 7 pitches in, he threw up his hand and turned and didn't walk toward the Reds dugout. He walked to the door behind home plate. And when he reached the warning track, he went down on his knees and then went face first into the cinders that made up the warning track around the outfield and home plate and the whole area. That was roughly an hour and a half later. At 2:45, an announcement was made that the game would begin in 30 minutes. Well, 30 minutes came by and there was no game. And finally, well after that, the announcement was made that the game was canceled and would be played tomorrow. Now, the backstory was that Marge Schott wanted to play the game then, that day, April 1st. She wanted to pick it up and go ahead and play, despite what we had all witnessed on the field in the first inning. Ray Knight was manager of the Reds, and Ray said to her, "We're not playing." And she said, "Well, you've got to play," because he said, "You do whatever you have to do. But we've talked about this amongst us in our clubhouse. We are not playing, and I've got 25 players, and I've got a coaching staff that has my back on this thing. So you do whatever you feel like you have to do, but we're not playing." And that was it. The best that she could do was play the next day, and obviously that's what they did. I think baseball is a little bit different than, and I know where you're going with this, and eventually they would have had to play. I mean, you could have postponed the next day too, but you're not going to postpone a week. And so 162 games as opposed to 17, it's a little bit different. And so I didn't fault them for playing the next day because they were going to have to play eventually anyway. Unlike this game, because I know what they're talking about now, and I think the easiest solution to this whole thing is to knock off one of the weeks that exists between the league championships and the Super Bowl. All you got to do is knock out 1 week. It ain't brain surgery here. But that's another story. I just, God bless Ray Knight, because Ray Knight was a man that had great vision, had great empathy for people, and he made the decision because he told her, "We're not playing, and you have to deal with that because you're owner of the club," and that was the end of it.
Well, you're spot on. We were talking about just before you came on the air about conceivably what they could do. We're going to have Reuben Brown on the program a little bit later on today. He's joined us before. Former multi-times was an all-pro offensive lineman. He'll be in the Hall of Fame one day. He's already in the College Football Hall of Fame, covers the Buffalo Bills, podcast, et cetera, about what's going on up there. It's hard to believe that the Bills are even going to play this Sunday. I mean, I don't fault the league for a second. They should not at this point be canceling games for nearly a week later. They do have to finish their season. There is a business side to all of this, and it's not being callous or cold, as I said earlier. You have to continue to go on, just like you're praying that Damar Hamlin can go on and his family can go on. But golly day, how hard is that going to be in Buffalo on Sunday?
I can't imagine. I saw somebody make a comment that the Bengals should not be required to play on Sunday, nor should Buffalo be required to play. Everybody else should play, but they shouldn't play. I would like to think that obviously there's been a lot of conversation. I'm sure there's been talk from the league office and the folks in Buffalo, the ownership and the coaches, et cetera. And I would imagine the same thing has been true as far as the Bengals are concerned, although it was not one of theirs. I think the way that they dealt with this whole thing was beyond criticism. I thought it was wonderful that what they did in every respect of the word, and the medical people and the response and the whole 9 yards. These people stood up proud and did a wonderful job. I don't know, and I agree with you. I hope people don't think it's callous to say it, but you just said it, and I agree with you. It is a business at the end of the day, and they can't cancel everything from now on and then go straight to however they end up seeding the teams that are involved in the situation. But I agree with you. It would be very, very difficult for, I would think, the Buffalo Bills to have to go back out and play this weekend after what happened here on Monday night. But I'm sure that they will figure out a way to work this thing out. It may not be to everybody's satisfaction, but I think everybody will understand, given the circumstances, that they had to do something. And hopefully what they do will be accepted, they meaning the NFL, it will be accepted by the majority of people, and with the understanding that, one, they had to make a decision, two, they were limited by the amount of time that they were dealing with, and go on from there.
I just thought it was unfair, Dad, in wrapping up with you here, and this stuff is hard to talk about because there's no easy answer on anything. Look, I'm not here to defend the NFL in any form or fashion. I mean, they're not perfect. Nobody's perfect. No organization is perfect. No human being is perfect. We know that. I just think in this day and age, we're so quick to judge people's reactions to things when you're talking about something of this magnitude. Much has been made of, Joe Buck coming on the air and saying, well, we're told that the teams are going to get 5 minutes. And you got people talking about nonsense like that. I mean, the National Football League, I don't even know where Roger Goodell was that night. He's probably back in New York somewhere. But for people to just jump on the bandwagon and criticize and kill Goodell and kill the NFL for not doing this or not doing that, and why didn't they do this and why didn't they do that? You've got a potential of a guy who he's just had cardiac arrest on the field, and you're scrambling around and trying to figure out what are we going to do. And I just think that we've reached a point now where, I mean, you are damned if you do and damned if you don't in every single decision you make anymore.
Well, I mean, I'm eliminating this tragedy that happened Monday night to begin with. Let's make sure we understand something here. This guy's making almost $64 million a year. He can be criticized every time he takes a breath.
Yes.
And so I don't have a great deal of empathy for him. But having said that, I was quick to be critical of him on Monday night for waiting as long as he did to make the decision not to play. But then I find out later on that the decision really wasn't his, because both football teams said we're not going to play. And I thought Zach Taylor was wonderful in the way he dealt with the Bengals side. Sean McDermott, the same. So it wasn't a matter of Roger Goodell making the decision as president of the National Football Commissioner, we're not playing. They made the decision for him, just like Ray Knight's Reds made the decision for Marge Schott in 1996. I understand better now, I think, and you know, I made a mistake because I jumped all over him. I understand now all the things that went in to where it ended up, because people, first and foremost, people were concerned about Damar Hamlin and the unknown of what was going on with him at the moment after he had been taken off the field by ambulance and taken to the UC Medical Center. I understand all that now. I understand where you're coming from, but again, if you're going to be commissioner of a league and you're going to make that kind of money, then you got to live with the criticism that comes your way. But again, I say that in a general sort of way, not taking into account or eliminating for a moment what happened on Monday night and how they had to deal with that on a minute by minute real time basis.
And you know, in summation, I gotta believe, based on everything that we found out later, once they got him into the ambulance, and I'm not making an excuse, and nobody has come out and said this, but they were waiting for his mom to be able to get down there before they got him to the hospital. If all of a sudden 5 minutes after this happens, you cancel the game, you got 65, 70,000 people pulling out of there, and I know ambulances can get through it, but I mean, it makes it a little bit harder if all of a sudden you got this mass exit of people trying to get this young man out of there. So again, it just, and I'm with you all the way. I mean, there are things that Goodell has done where he has earned criticism and should be held accountable. There's no doubt about it. But this was so different. We haven't seen anything like it in the better part of 50-some years, going back to a Detroit Lions player in the early 70s, if I'm not mistaken. And so, you know. But, Dad, thanks so much for sharing your insight on this. Really appreciate it. And thanks for the time today.
Okay, pal. Enjoy being with you guys.
Okay. All right. We love you. We'll see you soon.